Imagine yourself awakening, not to an alarm, but to the slow, gray light filtering through a high window. The air is cool, carrying the faint, salty scent of the sea from the Golden Horn. From almost any vantage point, you can see it, the impossible dome of the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. It seems to float above the city, a testament to God's glory and the Emperor's power, a constant, humbling reminder of your place in the cosmos. Its sheer scale is something you never quite get used to. It is the anchor of your world. The wealth of the empire is on full display, a dazzling, almost overwhelming spectacle. But you are also aware of the city's immense, intricate bureaucracy. Imperial officials, with their stoic expressions and official staves, are a common sight. Everything is regulated, recorded, taxed. To run a shop, to practice a trade, even to beg in a certain location, requires navigating a sea of rules. You are a subject of the emperor, and while he provides grain and spectacle, his government is an omnipresent, often invisible force in your life. In the distance, the first bells of the morning begin to chime from one of the city's hundreds of churches. It is the division of the city into two unwavering factions, the blues and the greens. On the surface, they are simply supporters of the chariot teams that race in the great hippodrome. But in reality, they are so much more. They are part political party, part social club, part street gang. Your neighborhood is likely aligned with one, and your loyalty is expected. A sound that will soon be joined by countless others weaving a blanket of resonant bronze over the rooftops. You live here in the Queen of Cities, and your day, like every day, is lived in the shadow of giants. You dress simply, a tunic, perhaps a cloak. The stone floor is cold beneath your feet. As you prepare for the day, the sounds of the city begin to rise. It is a labyrinth of stone and brick, of sudden, sun-drenched squares and alleys that remain in perpetual twilight. The air is thick with the scent of baking bread, of charcoal fires, of incense drifting from a nearby chapel, and underneath it all, the ever-present, earthy smell of a million people living together. The rumble of cart wheels on the Mazy, the main thoroughfare, the calls of fishermen down at the ports. You join the river of people flowing towards the Mazy, and it is here that the wonder of Constantinople truly unfolds. This is not just a street, it is the artery of an empire. You see faces and hear languages from every corner of the known world. A blonde, blue-eyed Varangian guardsman from the north, towering over the crowd. A group of merchants from Antioch, their Greek laced with Syriac, haggling over the price of spices. A dignitary from the Persian frontier, his fine silks a stark contrast to the rough wool of the local laborers. The world comes to Constantinople, and you walk among it every single day. The murmur of your neighbors through the thin walls of your apartment block, or insular. Life here is lived in close quarters, a constant press of humanity. As you step out into the narrow, winding street, the city envelops you. Your first task, perhaps, is to fetch water or to buy bread. The shops are overflowing with wonders, glimmering silks from China, chests of pepper and cloves from the distant east, fine glassware, intricate jewelry, and stacks of illuminated manuscripts. And there is another layer to this daily existence, a tension that hums just beneath the surface. When you walk the streets, you are keenly aware of who is a blue and who is a green. You might see the colors displayed subtly on a piece of clothing. An argument over a business deal can quickly escalate if the parties are from opposing factions. A tavern brawl can turn into a neighborhood-wide riot. The passion for the chariot races is a visceral, all-consuming thing, but it is also a proxy for deeper political and social grievances. And you feel a surge of pride in living at the center of the world, but you also walk with a certain caution. You guard your tongue, you watch for the colors of the factions, and you offer a prayer not only for your soul, but for your safety. Life in Constantinople is a life of both gilded splendor and quiet, knowing dread. It is a constant balancing act, lived in a city that is as perilous as it is magnificent. You learn to tread carefully, to watch what you say, to know which streets are safe for you and which are not. The roar from the hippodrome on race day is a sound of both celebration and potential danger. This same intensity applies to matters of faith. This is not a world of quiet, personal belief. Theology is a matter of public, passionate, and sometimes dangerous debate. The nature of Christ, the veneration of icons, the authority of patriarchs, these are topics discussed not just by priests in gilded churches, but by the baker, the soldier, and the fisherman. To hold the wrong view, to fall on the losing side of a theological dispute, could mean being branded a heretic. It could lead to social ostracization, the loss of your business, or worse. The line between piety and heresy is drawn by the powerful, and it can shift. It is yet another source of quiet, constant anxiety. And overarching all of this is the absolute power of the emperor. His image is everywhere on coins in mosaics. His authority is unquestioned. But this power has a dark side. You hear whispers. A wealthy senator, prosperous one day, is suddenly arrested in the night, his estates confiscated, his family exiled. A general, celebrated for a victory, is recalled and blinded on suspicion of treason. You never know the full story, only the rumors that ripple through the city. It is a distant threat, a fate reserved for the powerful, but it serves as a chilling reminder that no one is truly secure. The emperor gives and the emperor can take away with terrifying speed, so you live your life. You work your trade, you raise your family, you marvel at the beauty of the Hagia Sophia. The delicate balance of daily life in Constantinople, the careful dance between awe and anxiety, could not always hold. Sometimes the city's simmering tensions would reach a boiling point. In the year 532, during the 5th year of the reign of the Emperor Justinian, the delicate threads of order snapped. It could hold 100,000 people, a sea of humanity pressed together under the open sky. At one end stood the kathisma, the royal box, where the emperor himself would preside, separated from his people by a guarded passageway, yet visible to all. Here the emperor and his subjects met. Here they celebrated triumphs, and here they aired their grievances. And the Queen of Cities plunged into an inferno of its own making. It began as so many things did in the Hippodrome. The crowd, now a unified mob, poured out into the city streets. Their first target was the Praetorium, the office of the city prefect. They overwhelmed the guards and set the building alight. Imagine the vast U-shaped arena, the pulsating heart of the city's public life. The immediate cause of the trouble was the arrest of members from both the blue and green factions, condemned to death for their part in a recent wave of street violence. The rule of law vanished. The great central avenue, the Maze, became a battleground. The fire spread, fanned by the winter wind. They marched to the home of Hypatius, a respected senator and a nephew of a former ruler. Hypatius had no desire for the throne. He was a loyal servant of Justinian, but the mob gave him no choice. They dragged him from his home, and with his wife pleading at his side, they carried him on their shoulders back to the fire-scorched Hippodrome. There, amidst the roar of his new supporters, they placed a simple golden necklace. Soon, the original church of Hagia Sophia, a basilica built by a previous emperor, was engulfed in flames, its wooden roof collapsing in a shower of sparks and smoke. The nearby Church of Holy Peace, the public baths of Zeuxippus with their priceless classical statues, and the grand porticos leading to the Forum of Constantine were all consumed. The city was eating itself alive. It was aimed directly at the emperor, sitting impassively in the royal box. It was a challenge. Justinian, a ruler who was not born to the purple but had risen through ambition and intelligence, attempted to reason with the crowd through a herald. But his words were swallowed by their roar. The protest was no longer about the condemned men. It had become a raw outpouring of frustration against high taxes, against Justinian's aloof officials, and against the emperor himself. But in a rare moment of unity, both sides felt the punishment was unjust. They began to petition the emperor for mercy. The air was thick with the roar of the crowd, the thundering of hooves, and the dust kicked up from the track. But the usual chants for blue or green began to change. They merged, faltered, and then rose again as one single, rhythmic, thunderous cry. On that fateful day, January 13th, The chariot races were underway. Nika, Nika, Nika. It means conquer or victory, but this chant was not for the charioteers. As dusk fell, the anger could no longer be contained within the stadium's marble walls. Fires began to bloom against the night sky. The Nika revolt had begun. For 5 days, the city belonged to the mob. The rioters, their power growing with every passing hour, decided they needed a new emperor. Within the great palace, a sprawling complex of buildings and courtyards adjoining the hippodrome, the mood was one of utter despair. The city was lost, the fires burned just beyond the palace walls, and the sound of the mob acclaiming a new emperor was clearly audible. Justinian would flee, sailing across the Sea of Marmara to safety, abandoning the capital and his throne. The reign, it seemed, was over. The council gathered, their faces grim, ready to accept defeat. Justinian, his generals, and his counselors were trapped. She acknowledged that it was not proper for a woman to show such boldness before men. But the circumstances, she said, were too dire for convention. She looked at her husband, at his defeated council, and told them that flight, while it might preserve their lives, would lead to a life of exile and regret. A life she would not accept. The emperor, who had dreamed of restoring the glory of Rome, was now a prisoner in his own home. Her courage shamed them. It ignited a spark in Justinian. The talk of flight ended, new orders were given. The resolve to crush the rebellion was absolute. While the mob, nearly 30,000 strong, was still packed inside the hippodrome celebrating their apparent victory, the generals made their move. Imperial troops, a mix of hardened Gothic mercenaries and local soldiers, secretly surrounded the great arena. They barred every exit, trapping the crowd inside. She was the daughter of a bearkeeper for the hippodrome, a former actress from the lowest rungs of society. Hypatius, the reluctant usurper, was captured and brought before Justinian. He was executed shortly thereafter. Her marriage to Justinian had been a scandal. But in this moment of ultimate crisis, she possessed a resolve that the men around her lacked. The fires smoldered and a pall of smoke hung over the charred ruins. The Nika revolt was over. Justinian's authority, once challenged, was now cemented in blood and fear. The power of the factions was broken for a generation. The soldiers moved through the stands and across the track, their orders absolute. The joyous shouts of the crowd turned to cries of panic and terror. There was nowhere to run. The great public space that had been the heart of the rebellion now became its tomb. The chronicles state that tens of thousands of lives were extinguished that day. A decision was made. The imperial treasure was being discreetly loaded onto ships waiting in the palace's private harbor. And then Empress Theodora spoke. All eyes turned to her. She had not been born into nobility, but to defend this new city, and an empire reasserted, he would rely not only on stone and faith, but on something else. A terrifying secret, a liquid fire that could not be quenched. And then she uttered the words that would echo through history, the words that would change the fate of an empire. Her voice, calm and steady, cut through the fearful silence. I will not, she said, see the day when I am not greeted as empress. She spoke of the nature of power and of dignity in the face of death. For me, she declared, the royal purple is the noblest shroud. Silence fell upon the room. Theodora had chosen to die as an empress in her palace rather than live as a fugitive. The plan was entrusted to Justinian's most loyal generals, the stoic Belisarius and the grizzled Mutis. Then the soldiers entered. What followed was not a battle, but a swift and brutal suppression. By sunset, the hippodrome was silent, a horrifying tableau of the price of rebellion. A dreadful quiet fell over Constantinople. From the ashes of the old Hagia Sophia, Justinian would build a new one, a structure so magnificent it would stun the world for 1,000 years. An empire that could burn its own capital to the ground and then rebuild it with even greater magnificence required formidable means of defense. Justinian's new walls were strong, and his armies were disciplined, but the Byzantine Empire possessed another, more terrifying advantage. It was a weapon born of secret knowledge, a substance that seemed to defy the laws of nature. It was a state secret of the highest order. its formula and method of deployment known only to a trusted few. Their wooden ships are packed with soldiers, ready for the assault. Where it strikes the water, it does not die. Instead, it spreads, continuing to burn upon the surface of the sea, surrounding the enemy ships in an inescapable wall of flame. This gave the fire its ability to burn on water. This base was then likely mixed with other substances to increase its potency. Resins from pine trees would have made it thick and sticky, ensuring it would adhere to any surface it touched. Sulfur would have contributed to the suffocating smoke and the intensity of the heat. Some texts hint at the inclusion of quicklime, which generates heat when exposed to water, or even saltpeter, a key ingredient in gunpowder, which would have added an explosive quality to the mixture. Water, the sailors' only defense against fire, is useless. Panic ensues. Men leap from the burning decks only to find the sea itself alight. The psychological terror of the weapon is as devastating as its physical effects. And then, from the prows of the smaller, faster Byzantine warships, the dromons, something erupts. It is not a volley of arrows or a catapult stone. It is a stream of liquid flame, projected through a bronze tube, accompanied by a deafening roar and thick, noxious smoke. To possess this knowledge was immense privilege. To reveal it was the ultimate act of treason. It was known to its enemies as Greek fire. To the Byzantines themselves, it was called sea fire, or liquid fire. Imagine an enemy fleet, confident and numerous, sailing towards the sea walls of Constantinople. Where the liquid fire touches wood, it clings, burning with an unnatural intensity. For centuries, historians and scientists have tried to unravel the enigma of its composition. The recipe was so closely guarded that it was never written down in a complete, translatable form. It was passed from one generation of imperial engineers to the next, a sacred trust. But from various historical accounts, both Byzantine and Arab, we can piece together some of the likely ingredients. The base was almost certainly a form of petroleum or naphtha, a light, crude oil that could be gathered from natural seeps in the earth around the Black Sea. The true secret, however, was likely not in any single ingredient, but in the precise recipe, the process of heating and distilling the mixture, and the apparatus designed to deploy it. This apparatus was a marvel of engineering in itself. Known as a siphon, it was essentially a primitive flamethrower. A large bronze tube was mounted on the ship's prow, connected to a sealed tank of the liquid fire. Below deck, a team would work a pump, building up immense pressure inside the tank while the liquid itself was heated. The wealth, the resources, and the specific expertise to manufacture and deploy Greek fire were gone. But the secrets of the palace were not just chemical, they were also human. To understand the inner workings of the imperial court, we must look at a unique and powerful group of people who guarded its innermost chambers, individuals who wielded incredible influence from the shadows. The secret had vanished into the smoke of history, leaving only legends and the baffled accounts of its enemies. When the operator opened the valve, this pressure would force the burning liquid out of the nozzle in a powerful, terrifying jet. Smaller, handheld versions were also developed for use by Marines in close-quarters combat, as were clay grenades filled with the substance that could be hurled onto enemy decks. The strategic value of this weapon cannot be overstated. It was the empire's trump card. In the 7th and 8th centuries, massive Arab fleets laid siege to Constantinople, threatening to extinguish the empire entirely. On more than one occasion, when the city seemed on the verge of falling, the small Byzantine fleet sortied from the Golden Horn and unleashed the sea fire, annihilating the much larger enemy armada and saving the capital. It was a super weapon, a guarantee of naval superiority that preserved the empire for centuries. So why was this incredible secret lost? The answer lies in the slow, painful decline of the empire itself. The knowledge was so compartmentalized, so restricted, that it was inherently fragile. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, an army of Western knights sacked and occupied Constantinople, a catastrophic blow from which the empire never truly recovered. Libraries were burned, workshops were destroyed, and the institutional chains of knowledge were broken. The families and guilds who held the secret of the fire were scattered or killed. When the Byzantines eventually recaptured their capital over half a century later, the empire was a shadow of its former self. This carefully guarded secret of fire and chemistry was a reflection of the palace itself, a place of hidden knowledge and immense power. To truly understand the heart of Byzantine power, we must leave the public spaces of the city and enter the most private ones. We must pass through the guarded gates of the Great Palace, a city within the city, a labyrinth of halls, chapels, and chambers where the emperor lived, secluded from the world. And here, in these inner sanctums, we find a unique and powerful class of people, the court eunuchs. In the Byzantine mind, the logic was simple and pragmatic. A man with a family could be tempted to plot, to seize power for his own sons, to establish a dynasty. Others came from poor Byzantine families, for whom giving a son to imperial service was a path to otherwise unattainable wealth and influence. This was the emperor's high chamberlain, the man who guarded the imperial bedchamber. A man like Basil Lecapenos, who held the post in the 10th century, was the de facto ruler of the Byzantine Empire for decades, governing with wisdom and authority while a succession of emperors reigned in name only. He was the ultimate gatekeeper. He decided who was granted an audience with the emperor and who was turned away. He was the first person the emperor saw in the morning and the last he spoke to at night. He controlled the flow of information, reading sensitive reports to the ruler and often advising him on the correct course of action. Some were even the sons of aristocrats, a strategic sacrifice made by a noble house to place one of their own at the emperor's side. They could become heads of government ministries, controlling the vast imperial treasury or the sprawling bureaucracy. They became trusted diplomats, sent on sensitive missions to foreign courts. Some even became generals, leading armies in the field with great distinction, like the famous general Narses who served under Justinian. But a eunuch removed from the normal course of family life could have no direct heirs. His loyalty, therefore, could be absolute. His ambition could be channeled entirely into the service of the emperor and the state. And so, these men, who had paid a great personal cost, were granted access to the very epicenter of power. Their paths to the palace were varied. Some were born in foreign lands, captured in war as boys and brought to the capital. They began their careers in the vast imperial household, serving as pages, scribes, or attendants. They were the only men permitted in the private quarters of the empress and her court, a domain forbidden to all others. They were the silent witnesses to the most intimate moments of the imperial family. They learned to see everything and say nothing, to anticipate needs, to understand the subtle shifts in mood and favor that determined policy. They became masters of observation and discretion. From these humble beginnings, a talented and ambitious eunuch could rise to astonishing heights. But the most coveted position of all was that of the perikoimonos, literally, the one who sleeps beside the chamber. The power of the perikoimonos was immense, though it was always indirect, exercised through his proximity to the emperor.